We're walking today along the old Welland Canal. This is the third Welland Canal, and it was started construction in 1872 and finally completed and put into service in 1881. We're walking along right now in front of lock number 13. These locks were built out of Queenston limestone, and they're about 270 feet long and about 45 feet wide and 14 feet deep. So this was kind of a standard size that they decided on for the third Welland Canal. So there really isn't very much of a trail along here. It's really just a footpath that people have, that's been established by just people basically walking across the top of it. It was never constructed as a footpath. Every once in a while along here you run into the old bollards that ships used to tie up at. And then in between the locks there are canal sections. And the interesting thing about this, and it took me a while to understand how this worked, but in behind the locks, or on the side of the locks, on the right side of this picture, there used to be what they called weir ponds. So the weir pond was basically a supply of water to fill the canal between the lock sections. And in that way they would have a water supply where the locks could feed from or feed into, and also allow the ships to navigate in between the locks. So the weir ponds are almost as important as the locks themselves. And there's really not much left of the weir ponds today. There's some really heavy marshy areas beside the locks. And if you go down there, they're quite wet and kind of swampy.
So even today you can see the bracing in the bottom of the lock that once held back the lock gates from swinging any further. So you can see that the canal walls are in really rough shape and are starting to collapse into the canal itself. The canal is really not being used for anything right now except a spillway for overflow water from the rest of the current canal system. So I'm not sure what the implications are if it were to collapse completely, but all in all, still, considering it was built in 1881, it's still in remarkable shape.
This is the second canal that was built in a more sturdy fashion. The first Welland Canal was built entirely out of wood, if you can imagine that. But the second and third Welland Canals were built of again the Queenston limestone. So it's really amazing that they were able to maneuver all of these blocks in place, and I don't know what the mechanism is for securing them. I imagine that there is some mortar in between these blocks that hold the entire group of blocks together. These days, the old locks really just supply or act as an overflow system. There's a very large weir pond at the top of the flight locks in Thorold, and that weir pond overflows into this Third Welland Canal section. So this is really just carrying excess water, and from time to time they release a great deal more water, and that rushes through this system. And in fact, if you go up to the weir pond, there's a gate system there, and I believe there are warning signs or signals, well, definitely signals that would tell you that a great wash of water is imminent down through this overflow system. The flow really varies. Sometimes in the late summertime, when the water levels are pretty much at their lowest, there's really not that much water going through here, and some of the locks are fairly dry, really. Like the bottoms are mostly exposed. So this is actually kind of an interesting spot here. There's basically a channel going back into the weir pond, and presumably it allowed ships to go into the weir pond a short distance, and possibly to unload or to turn around. I think if they were turning around, they would be. I guess the true name would be called a windage hole. As remarkable as this construction is, and it was pretty state-of-the-art at the time, but during the construction, there were a lot of people who were killed in the construction phase. Some documentation I've read says that 107 people were killed during the construction of the Third Welland Canal. So that's a huge number of people who lost their lives building this system. So here's the old railway bridge, and this bridge actually dates back to this time, in the 1881 area. Originally it was a swing bridge, of all things. And at some point when the canal was shut down, the bridge was fixed in place, and it's actually still in service today. There's still trains going across this bridge. So here we are up at lock 17. So this is the lock that's immediately to the south of the railway bridge, the main line bridge. The Meriton or Blue Ghost Tunnel goes underneath the southern side of this lock, lock number 18. Thanks for watching the video. Please subscribe to join me on my next adventure.